Survivor specialists are back, and when Alexa's gone, there's always Vaughn. Will came up with that, Vaughn. I just want you to know that. He said to us that on the Amazing Race podcast, and I feel like it's great and needs to be used every single time now.
I love it. Maybe I'll put that on my tombstone.
There you go. People will be questioning, who is this Alexa?
Right.
But, hey. But we're here with the Survivor Edge of Extinction episode 11 recap. We just had a great episode of TV, and Vaughn, you get to come in and swoop from Alexa the loved one visit and this tribal council performance, blind side of Ron, and all of these reactions. I think this is the most the jury's ever said in an episode, which I thought was a lot. But we'll talk about it all. And Alexa's not here to talk about any of it. She's going to be really bummed that she missed this one.
I'm happy that she'll be bummed. I'm happy to swoop in. I'm always here, and I'm happy it was a great episode.
Yeah. And so, Vaughn, I really wanted to, I was telling you this beforehand, I really wanted to lay into you about the fantasy team, but you officially have more people left on your fantasy team than I have, because that's 4 straight people I lost. Thankfully, I still have like a 30-point lead on Alexa and like a 64-point lead on you. But
Who's
it is
counting?
a little...
Who's counting?
Who's counting? But it is a little devastating.
Yeah, I think that you still have bragging rights. I think I still need to eat a little bit of crow. I mean, I'm used to utter complete dominance, and I have to say I'm out of excuses. I guess if I had to come up with a good excuse, it's that maybe I overcompensated for Edge of Extinction with my picks. I'll blame it completely on the twist and be back next year to reclaim the glory. Certainly not my year, but as you say, I'm making an appearance when your team is on a downward trajectory. I do still have Gavin and Rick left. Both, I think, have been playing well lately, though in different ways. So maybe I could at least sneak out a win out of the season, though that will not actually make me the winner.
Oh, sorry, my thing completely cut out. That happens. Everybody can hear you. It's just I can't hear you. But I heard enough of what you said. I will say that you had Keith and Reem, or I'm sorry, Keith and Chris. You didn't pick Reem. Sorry, I didn't want to say that. But you had Keith and Chris, and then you also picked Devins. And right now, the MVP of your team is the man who spent days on Edge of Extinction. So you really did have a rough go of it this week.
It's a really sorry team. I mean, Keith is honestly probably one of the worst players of all time. So I almost deserve like a lot more negative points for that than I even got. Especially when you consider that I think I had the last pick and I picked him over Victoria, who, oh man, that is a huge regret. I mean, I've been loving Victoria this season, and really more than my regrets over who I did and didn't pick and how bad my team ended up. I think that my initial impressions are often very accurate, and I feel the same way about characters preseason versus during the season. But this season, the people that I liked a lot of times in the preseason, I feel completely different about, and vice versa. And Victoria is one of those. I was kind of like, this sort of character is a little played out in the preseason, but I really enjoyed her. I've been disappointed that she hasn't gotten as much airtime after the merge, though.
Yeah, and the last round started with me deciding between Ron and Victoria, and I assumed you or Alexa were going to take whichever one I didn't take. And neither of you took Victoria, and now Team Carl's over there with possibly, I really believe this, possibly the winner of the season on his team. And Vaughn, normally we only get your input preseason. You come in, you do the fantasy draft, and then for some reason we always tell you you're going to come back on, and you never do.
Right. And I'm just kind of the ghost, that's ever present, dominating all the fantasy games. It's kind of like, faceless, wonder. But,
exactly.
Yeah.
We say Vaughn to the survivors, and like, what? Who? Like,
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
But now you're actually here. We're at the final 6.
Yeah.
We have Edge of Extinction playing out. What are you feeling about this season right now before we get into tonight's episode? Because this is not a Vaughn season, because this has not gone the way you expected it.
No, not at all. But I will say, I mean, partially maybe it was because my fantasy team did so poorly pre-merge. I was down on the season early on. I think a lot of people felt that way. I thought that the Edge of Extinction twist played out a little bit like a lot of us feared, which is that it took crucial time away from storytelling for those that were still on the island. And it's really led to a little bit of an under edit for a lot of the people that are still left in the game. And we've seen big character after big character voted out. And we're actually left with an assortment of people that we don't know nearly as well as the last, say, 4 or 5 people that have been voted out. And so I think that is is the kind of black mark on the season, that the Edge of Extinction twist. It has been really fun to see Reem every episode. I mean, Edge of Extinction has had some ups and downs for sure, but I think that with a 1 hour show, it makes it so difficult to tell the stories and to really provide a full and complete edit of these people when you have to, have an entire segment devoted to these people who have already been voted off. That said, the post-merge, and particularly like the last few episodes, have really picked up. And the beginning I was like, I don't really even know who I'm really rooting for anymore. I don't love the returnees, though I do like David Wright. I don't even know who I'm kind of want to win. But lately, I've really enjoyed the War Dog. I'm sure he will be very pleased to hear. He has really come on. I regret everything I said about him. He was an amazing character. I ended up being really sad to see him go. Ron, oh man, I was so down on Ron. I was making fun of the whole Ron Clark story. So this is really just an apology tour for me, this whole episode. But Ron became, I was sad to see him go tonight, but he became an amazing character. I mean, almost a caricature of himself, the way that he would, give these confessionals. But he was a constant source of entertainment and really at times played a good game that we can talk a little bit about, any weaknesses that he had. But I'm actually to the point where I was kind of thinking early on, maybe this is going to be a bottom 10 season for me or something like that. And obviously this season is not going to reach the heights of last season for probably anybody. But I do think that the end game here has boosted it a little bit more up in my rankings, and it's sort of solidly in like the rewatchable tier at this point.
Yeah, I'm putting this is probably in my top half right now already, just because of what has happened recently. And I want to say, with how much we saw of Edge of Extinction this whole show, and that has been the downfall of this season, has been too much time spent at Edge of Extinction, so that the 7 people we have left going into tonight, we almost don't know, or we don't know them as well. But tonight, we have
no edge tonight.
4 returning players, and Mr. War Dog is the last person voted out, and we don't go to Edge of Extinction tonight. And I thought that was incredible because these are your end game players, these 7 right here. And I guess, it's one of those where I guess now that all of the over-the-top characters, and Devins is an over-the-top character, let's be real. But I guess since the majority of the over-the-top characters are gone, we've seen as much as we need to see about them if one of them are going to come back into the game. Now tell us about these people who are left. And I loved tonight's episode. I thought tonight's episode from top to bottom, aside from Jeff Probst not saying, come on in, guys, was an absolutely fantastic episode of TV.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. I think this was one of the best episodes of the season, and there have been some good ones. And I think it's not a coincidence that it happened on, I guess, the first episode that didn't really feature any Edge of Extinction at all until the ending credits.
And one of the big things that we saw tonight is we saw a lot of power dynamic shifts, and we saw a lot of people taking control and then a lot of people losing control. This episode starts off with Ron handing Rick that advantage menu. Now, if you're Rick Devins, why are you believing Ron? And why do you think he would just give this to you? Because it seemed crazy to me that Rick was sold like Ron's doing a good thing for me. Maybe he's playing it up for the cameras, but how could you believe that?
Right. No, I agree. I think in Survivor, you have to always assume that the person that you're playing with is making the most rational choice for them. And if something seems too good to be true, it often is. And this is a scenario where someone just blindsided you. It's the second time in the game, in the last few votes, that this particular person has blindsided you. And then he comes up to you in the darkness of night and says, hey, bud, by the way, I'm going to give you this advantage. It just makes no sense. And it maybe in some alternate universe, when you were playing with someone like Philip Shepard or just someone completely erratic and out of their head, maybe you could convince yourself that, okay, the general assumption that everyone's playing a rational game goes out the window for this person. But Ron has played a very reasonable, very thought out game, and he does not deserve that assumption to be taken away. So I can't tell how much on a scale of 1 to 10 Rick really believed him. Maybe, we'll get it on Twitter or whatever this week. But if he really did believe him more than, say, a 4 out of 10, then that's on him.
That's on him. Yeah. And I do think there's probably something in these confessionals where he's talking about, well, if it's not real, then I can use this to my advantage. Because I don't think Rick's going to win. I still don't believe Rick wins. I think if Aurora goes home tonight, Rick wins. I am still sold, and I want to hear who you think is going to win, but I'm still sold that Victoria's pulling this out because tonight she was the one who brought up Ron should go, despite the fact that she didn't vote for Ron. But I just want to say real quick, I think that Rick is just one of the best tribal counselor players in Survivor history. Hands down. Don't care that this is season 38. He is unbelievable. And what he did tonight, it's showboating, but he's showboating to a jury that absolutely loves him.
They ate it up. I mean, they ate it up. I was eating it up. I mean, I'm a Rick Devens fan. I liked him in the preseason. He's somebody who I liked all the way through. He's had some bad episodes. He's had some amazing episodes. Tonight was obviously one of his amazing episodes, but the way he played that out, I mean, it was perfectly orchestrated. He knew that it was possible that that menu was going to end up being bogus, and he knew exactly what he was going to say. He knew how he was going to ham it up, and he said at the end, like, "Oh, it's cool, bro. I love you." I mean, he doesn't actually harbor super ill will towards Ron and Julie, but a lot of those people on the jury do harbor ill will towards those two because they've been on the right side of a lot of recent votes. And man, they could not have loved that moment anymore. And I see why everyone thinks that Rick Devens is such a jury threat at the end.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If Rick Devens sits at the final three, he's going to win because he's going to make the best argument by far. He's gone through every single element of this season, despite the fact that he's been voted out. He still has played such a great game. And this shows, we always talk about people who get screwed, for lack of the better word. But you know, we talk about Ali Elliott, and we talk about players like, I don't know, even Alan Ball was somebody who pretty much got swap screwed. So I'm just talking heroes, healers, hustlers, because that's what's popping into my mind. But there's so many players in Survivor history who've been swap screwed. Rick Devens was swap screwed. But Rick Devens got a second chance. And by getting that second chance, look how good of a player Rick Devens really is. So these people who go home pre-merge, that's why I'm all in for a pre-merge season, because
luck is a huge facet of the game. There's no question about it. And it really does prove, I mean, what we've said in a lot of off-season podcasts and stuff like that, which is that just because someone goes out early, if there's some sort of twist involved, that does not make them de facto a bad player or even a mediocre player. Fantastic players can go out early, and that would have happened to Rick Devens in basically any other season. But I mean, more than just him being a game player, I just want to briefly point out, I find him to be an extremely magnetic, charismatic personality. I know not everyone in the sort of Survivor online landscape likes him as much as I do, but to me, he's just refreshing every time he's on your screen. I think in a season with a lot of really strong characters, I think he's clearly the breakout, guaranteed returnee of the season, on a season where I think that there will be a few returnees.
Yeah, I think War Dog and Rick are both going to be guarantees because I think they both love it. That's the thing too. Like both these guys are loving it. But what I think is funny and what's ultimately going to be Rick's downfall is he's still underestimating all of the women who he's playing with. He still doesn't think that they're ever going to get him. Like he's still in his mind, like he sees tonight, like, oh wow, somebody voted out Ron. That's interesting. But I still don't think he's going to sit there and be like, man, they're going to get me. Like, I think he knows all of their moves, and he doesn't, because tonight it could have been Aurora going home, but who does that help? That helps nobody. They're all too smart for that. So Ron goes home. But yeah, I agree. I don't understand the hatred for, not the hatred, but there's been some hatred. For Rick Devens on the internet makes absolutely no sense. And
I've stopped sort of trying to rationalize the internet and sort of Reddit's hatred for this player or that player. I can't compute the ebbs and flows of the popularity.
Well, and not for nothing, he finds an idol tonight, and instantly the Ben comparisons start. Like, shut up! Anybody who's making a Ben comparison, I don't care if it's Sandra Diaz-Twine. Shut up! I don't care. Like, stop. Because Ben did not have the game rigged for him, and this game is not rigged for Rick Devens. Shut up.
Right. I mean, I will say, just sort of briefly going back to the episode, I mean, I think that there are a lot of takeaways that you can take away from that sort of scene where he found the idol, right? Number one, good on him. You know, he was caught. They knew he was finding the idol. A lot of times when people in his history of Survivor get sort of targeted with like they're the idol hunter guy label, they stop. They say, oh, well, okay, now I need to really pull back. You know, they think I'm looking for idols. They've caught me. I'm going to lay low for a few days. But Rick obviously came to the conclusion, I know I'm going to be a target. I caught someone looking through my bag. They know I'm looking for idols, so screw it. I'm going to spend 24/7 looking for idols. And of course, a lot of people do, look for idols a lot, and we never see it because they don't find them. I understand that. But good for him for putting in the effort and understanding that when your back is against the wall, just lean in. And, bad on the other players, because as we've seen before, nothing good can happen when you make the next boot too obvious. And this sort of boot rarely happens today in modern Survivor. It used to happen all the time in old school Survivor, where there'd be one clear outcast like Terry Dietz or whatever, who had no chance of possibly not getting voted out if they didn't continue to win immunity.
Yeah.
But Rick was that guy this episode. I mean, Ron Ron and Julie obviously try to fake him out a little bit. But overall, I mean, this would have been the opposite of a blindside had he been voted out. And there's danger to that, because when people's back are against the wall, they're going to oftentimes go full throttle to find idols and scramble. And that's what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And he made it work. And I loved how he found the idol, like him shimmying up the tree. Like, that's great.
I don't know how he pulled that off.
That's great.
He's a big guy. Yeah, he's a big guy. And I love that was good TV when, showing Aurora, sort of pull the buff off her eye and then back down. And then Gavin's looking around like, what animal's in the tree?
Yeah.
That was a good move. I like that.
And even though when he goes down in the reward challenge, the coach challenge, the immunity challenge, not reward, but when he goes down and Jeff's like, oh, the first one out's Rick Devens, and it's like, yeah, never a good thing, especially when they've told you you're going home already. Like,
right.
And the thing is too, Rick Devens is a troll at heart. He really is. Like, I know this personality because I love this personality because it's me. This is the same personality I have in a lot of my life, which maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. It's probably a bad thing. But he's a troll at heart. And when everyone is against him, he's going to call you out and start rubbing it in immediately.
Hey, why don't we all?
Yeah, in a lovable way.
Yeah.
He had two great lines this episode. Hey, if you all give this to me, I'll make a final 3 deal with all of you. And then when they're sitting around the campfire, and he says, why don't we all make a move together? Fantastic.
Both were really, really good. I mean, just sort of self-deprecating about his bad predicament. He had a lot of great lines. I mean, he had the other line that I loved is he said, Survivor is a grind and I'm grinding.
Mm-hmm.
I love that one. I mean, he's just a quotable guy. I mean, he's just a really good find for the show.
Absolutely. And I'm surprised it took them this long to find him, since he seems like he's been a really big fan of the show for so long. But yeah, I think everything Rick did tonight, like, I'm not going to sit here and listen to like, oh, it's rigged for Rick. Like, no, there's idols out there. Go find an idol. Any of them could find the idol. It's just we're seeing Rick look for it because Rick finds it. I'm sure that Victoria, Julie, Lauren, they're all looking for it. Well, maybe not Lauren because she already has one. But everybody's looking for idols. I want to say, though, what I thought was amazing about the Aurora getting her hand caught in the cookie jar, Lauren and Victoria are pushing her to do it. And neither one of them gets caught at all by Rick Devens. And I thought that was fantastic because those two girls are so sly. And they're the ones who made this move happen tonight, despite the fact that Victoria didn't actually vote for Ron. So she can turn around and be like, I didn't vote you out, Ron. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, we need to talk about that because the actual vote formulation and the extra vote and everything was weird to me. But yeah. Well, let's go back briefly chronologically and go to the loved ones visit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, this has to be the most normal assortment of loved ones of all time, right? Like, I was waiting for the next, like, Aunt Patty sort of character to walk through that jungle, and they were not coming. I mean, I also think, I have a theory, we'll have to do some online sleuthing. I think Ron brought in a ringer. I don't think that's his husband. I think he tried to find the most attractive person and the most adept person for the challenge so that he could win the challenge. That's just throwing it out there.
That's a hell of a theory.
I think he recruited that guy. I think he found him online.
I will say that Bryce Isaiah is claiming that numerous of these daddies look more like zaddies, and they could be on the Zaddy calendar for 2020, which I want a Zaddy calendar podcast hosted.
I think he may have found him on, like, the Zaddy Ringer, the Zinger, if you will, website. No. So, I mean, I don't really have anything funny to say about the actual loved ones because they were all very normal. There were some heartfelt moments, yada, yada. But what I do want to say is this is the challenge you never want to win. And I mean, we've said it before, and I've heard you guys say it before, and it's baffling that anyone tries. It seemed like almost everyone was trying except for the people that literally just couldn't run up the hill anymore. But Ron and his ringer destroyed it, and then he immediately paid the price in the same episode. And the 3 people that plotted his destruction were, besides Rick, the 3 people who were left out of the reward, and they were all, at least as what we were shown, partially motivated by the fact that they were left out. And maybe more importantly than that, the fact that they were left out gave them the opportunity to all be together. Yeah. And, Victoria said, hey, we've never really been on the same side before, but now that we've got essentially this free time where there's no one else for me to talk to, let's talk. And lo and behold, it becomes kind of a voting block for at least one episode.
Yeah, and I think this is just one episode because I think whenever they can get Rick out, they're going to try to get Rick out. And I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think preview, I don't know if you saw the preview, but the next time on Survivor essentially just showed, I think they called Rick a joker, and essentially he was just like running through the jungle.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, and I also heard Reem say, it's okay, everyone's a liar, it's a game or whatever, and it's like, okay, Reem, timeout. Why does Ron get a pass?
Ron, I think Reem's going to win. You asked me who my winner pick is. Yeah. I think Reem is going to win.
Well, let's hear it now before I start talking about way too much about edit, because that's about to start happening.
Okay. So I think, I mean, as much as I would like either two of my boys, Rick or Gavin, to win to give me a little bit of bragging rights in this season, it's been devastating for me fantasy-wise. Though, I'll go ahead and get it in that I did win the Eliminator game. Not the first time, certainly will not be the last, so I'm not completely inept. I think the winner of this season is Lauren.
Really?
I thought that for a while. She's had some, in terms of editing, I think that she's had some sort of long bouts of invisibility from an editing perspective. She's had some peaks and valleys, but to me, her edit reminds me a lot of Michelle Fitzgerald. I mean, it's weirder than Michelle's. Michelle's was a little bit more obvious, I think. Because I've rewatched Co Wrong relatively recently, and the times they try to pigeonhole Michelle's confessionals, it really kind of makes it obvious where they're trying to go with that. It's less obvious for Lauren, but no one really has an amazing edit left. I think Victoria's edit has a lot of holes. Devin, certainly, for a guy who I think is probably very progressive and very, not at all a sexist, the show seems to been going out of its way to paint him to be a misogynist. And in 2019, that seems to be a pretty bad look for your chances of winning the game from an editing perspective. But I think Lauren, I think that she's really kind of got a revenge for Kelly late game edit right now that really is kind of shades of Natalie Anderson. Natalie Anderson had a very sort of slow build up. She had some episodes of invisibility. Jeremy went out a little bit more towards the middle part of the game, but it wasn't until like the last 3 episodes, as you guys will remember, that Natalie Anderson really kind of came into her own. And I think we could maybe be starting to see the beginning of that here, because you see Kelly go out and then War Dog goes out, which was very much kind of a vengeance thing for Lauren. And now she doesn't like Ron either because of his role in that vote. And so I think you could really see her come into her own. Do I love that? I like Lauren okay, but I think that she's one of the sort of lesser characters on the season. I don't think she's necessarily a lesser player, but I think she is a lesser character. So she makes a little bit less of a fun winner, but I do think she's headed for the victory.
See, I think Victoria, I think tonight even rubbed it in a little bit more.
I would love for Victoria. I would love for you to be right in this one rare instance. I usually love being right the most of anything, and I often am, which is a glorious feeling. But in this case, I love Victoria. And if you were right, that will take. I agree with you that I think this season is about middle of the pack. And lately, we've been having seasons that, in my opinion, are either trash or amazing. And this season is sort of in that way joyously mediocre because it's neither extreme. But if Victoria wins, I'm bumping it up a couple spots because I do love her. And I think she's played a really good game. And I just don't think we've seen her lately, which makes me think she's not going to win.
See, I disagree.
Good.
We're getting little pieces of her, but big characters are going home. And so tonight I wrote down a couple things about Victoria, which I'll get to. I put them in my diary over here that I keep of all the Victoria confessionals.
Sweet nothings about Victoria.
Yeah. But I had Lauren as my preseason winner pick. So if Lauren wins, that's great. She's on my fantasy team. It would just complete this epic journey I've had here. Because right now I do have the Davids from last season. I had 4 people go in a row. Is Lauren going to be my Nick Wilson? Possibly. Right. So, but the reason I'm saying Victoria, 2 things tonight. She had the first confessional after the loved ones. Now we like you said, we don't hear that much from Victoria. We hear here and there, but we had that confessional from her right after the loved ones talking about, I don't like that Ron just did this to me. This doesn't I don't like this way this feels. And then she's the one who brings up that Ron is the one they should vote out, despite the fact that she doesn't even vote for Ron. So I think that that's the show's way of telling us, we need to let you know that this was Victoria's move, because at the end of the day, she's going to pitch this one to the jury, and you need to understand that she was in on it despite the fact that she voted the wrong way.
Yeah, and I guess the editing counter argument, I felt the same way. I was actually sort of, because I prefer Victoria, I was pleased in the moment when the show was painting it to be her move initially. But then after he was voted out, it pans immediately to Rick and then to Lauren, who's like, that felt good, and never to Victoria, which is a constant frustration for me because I really think she's playing an amazing game. She's voted correctly. the vast majority of the time. So I think we're in strong agreement that she deserves to win and that she's playing a good game. I just think that the fact that the show hasn't highlighted it as much, sort of foretells that maybe she's headed for maybe a second or third place. But I like her game, and I think in a season, this is by far, I think, of any recent season in recent memory. Millennials versus Gen X was a little bit like this, where the big top dogs are just going in a row, where voting blocks are forming every single time. And this is modern Survivor, where you stick your nose out there as the head honcho. If you don't win immunity, then you're going home. And then if you do win immunity, the next one on the rung, or if you have an idol in the case of tonight, the next head honcho on the rung is going home. Yeah. And you've essentially got, a group of people who in a season like Ghost Island, leaving the top two finishers in the game would have been goats. If you throw folks like Gavin and Julie and Lauren and their games and what they've done up to this point, it looks basically about like what Laurel did.
Yeah.
But obviously they've eliminated every single big threat, and so one of the goats has to win.
And I think that's amazing. See, so one of my favorite seasons, and I don't know where I had it in my last season rankings. I think I had 7 or 8. I'd probably put David vs. Goliath just ahead of it, but I have to rewatch it. But it's Ko-Rong. And the reason I love Ko-Rong is it's such a shit show. You have no idea. Everybody who said Aubrey was going to win, like you said, you watch that season and you're really looking for an edit. Michelle Fitzgerald is an obvious win. And I kept saying that the entire season, and I got shit on the entire season. And then she won. And I think I lost 1,000 followers from that.
And watching live, I thought Sydney was going to win. So, I mean, it was not super obvious the first time. And that season felt completely up for grabs.
And that's why it was so much fun, though, is because you were going into a finale with 4 people. I think that finale only had 4 people because one of the
all the medevacs and everything, too.
With all the medevacs, yeah. So it only had 4 people, but you felt like 3 of the 4 could win. The only one who you didn't think was going to win was Ty. Right. This season, I'm sitting here again. Final 6, and yes, now there's 10 people over on Extinction Island. It just keeps getting bigger. What a party! But there's 6 people left in the game,
right?
And if you made an argument for any of them to win, I could probably sit here and go, "Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right." Despite the fact that I'm still feeling like Victoria's my 1, Lauren's my 1A, 1B, whatever, and Rick is my 1C, and then I would say Gavin and Julie are like 1.5.
Yeah.
And then Aurora's like 2.
I think Aurora is the only one that I would probably confidently say is 100% out for me. Mm-hmm. But I think that, Gavin and Julie, Julie has kind of had some ups and downs emotionally, but overall, I think she's been solid and she's had some good moments. I think Gavin has really kind of come into his own. It looked like he was kind of on the brink of getting voted out and being on the wrong side of the numbers, but he laid low. That's really something that I think that the good players this season have been able to do, which is that almost everyone at one point in this game has been on the wrong side and has been exposed and has felt like they were on the bottom. And the people that have succeeded, the people that are still left in the game, like someone like Gavin, laid low for a couple votes. And in the parlance of this season, was a passenger for a couple votes until he got his feet under him and he felt like he could sort of be in the driver's seat again. And that's what we saw last week with the War Dog vote. And then obviously Gavin, tonight, his social game was good enough that Aurora, and we can talk about the whole secret vote or the extra vote thing, but his social game was good enough that, the 3 girls essentially made an alliance while Gavin was on the reward. But when he came back, they said, "Hey, we got a plan for you," and Victoria trusted him that he would be on board, and he wrestled with it a little bit ethically, but he ended up, we can go ahead and get to it. I guess I don't understand the math. Call me Rick Devens being bad at math, but I don't understand the math here because ultimately what ended up happening when you looked at the votes at the end was that Gavin used both of the votes.
Yeah.
Already on Ron.
Yeah. So it was 4-3-1.
Didn't wait for the revote.
Right. It was 4-3-1. So what they wanted to do was the reason that Victoria still votes for Rick Devens is to ensure that there's 4 votes on Rick Devens. Because if he doesn't play an idol, they wanted Rick to go home.
Right.
Now, they knew that they didn't know where Rick was voting, but I guess that they were assuming maybe he votes for Ron. So that's why they needed to put the 2 extra votes and another vote. So it was 4-3-1. If Rick votes for Ron, they need to make sure that it's 4-4. Do you know what I'm saying? Okay. So that's why
why were they concerned about him being immune if they were just going to use the extra vote in the first instance and not on the revote?
I think, no, what it is you can use the revote. I think on the piece of paper it said you can use the revote again.
But you can use extra vote again on a revote if you use it the first time.
Yes.
unless
You were
the
part
vote.
of the tie, and then you can't
Oh,
vote.
interesting.
So
Okay,
they were
okay. Well, I
worried
guess
that
that's the part I didn't get. Okay, okay.
yeah. So they
So
were
they
worried
were
that
in
if
a tie.
Aurora got
Mhm.
voted, she wouldn't be able to use it again, and then all of a sudden, oh crap, now it's 3-2 or something like that.
Okay.
But what I
Yeah.
thought was really interesting about this is Gavin still did it, despite the fact that Ron gave him one of the best days of his life and his honeymoon and all that. Gavin still did it. And I thought that was a really awesome move.
Yeah.
Gavin has done a lot of things on this season that have surprised me because I never thought he was going to have it in him. And every time he still comes through and pulls it out. And I'm loving every second of it, every time it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I almost picked him as my winner,
Mhm.
and I did pick him on my team, but I almost picked him as my winner pick. And what ultimately made me shy away from him is the fact that I didn't think he had the sort of killer instinct that Nick Wilson had. I thought he had the Southern charm and that kind of like, disarming presence. And obviously, people hadn't seen Nick yet, but I didn't think that he was going to be able to stab people as mercilessly as Nick was able to do when he needed to. But tonight, he proved me my preseason predictions wrong again because. Even though he was a little bit torn about it and felt a little bit broken up about it, he ended up doing it, and I think it was a good move.
And he did it to Eric too. And I think what
Yeah.
Gavin sees is I think he realizes he can beat a lot of I think he thinks he can make a better argument against somebody like Victoria, Lauren, Aurora, Julie than he can against Rick or Ron.
No question. He's right.
So he knows, like, okay, if you all want to get rid of Ron, sure, I'll show my loyalty to you. Don't forget to take me to the final three. Don't forget to take me to the final three. And that's what he's really playing for right now is just to get to the final three without Ron or Rick or anybody who's sitting on Edge of Extinction right now.
Right,
And I think that's a smart move. I think he's ultimately going to fall just short. But I do think that Gavin has shown me a lot in the recent episodes that I've just been like, wow, I'm loving every second of this. So yeah, and then Julie was kind of quiet tonight. But I think that what Julie's going to end up regretting the most in her entire game is that she kept around Rick Devens at the merge because she was the one who really fought to keep Rick Devens in the game. And I think she's realizing now, like, oh crap, he's going to win.
And I think that what has hurt Julie, even though she's been on the right side of a lot of votes, she had a strong ally in Ron, though obviously that's gone out the window now, is that her gameplay, like with that crazy tribal council, for example, when Julia went home, I think for the other players, it read as erratic and it read as emotional, and she kind of came across to them as a basket case. Even though I do think that she's a good player, and I think she's a rational person, I think she's sharp, and at times, like when you squint, you can sort of see some shades of kind of Chrissy or Denise Stapley or whatever with Julie's game, but she's ultimately, I think, given off a negative, almost kind of like Hannah vibe to, or early shade, early Ko-Rong Aubrey vibes, where she just kind of came across as rather than being kind of calculating, she kind of came across as being emotional. And then when you sort of add on the layer that people are just kind of naturally sexist, even women against other women, I think that sort of emotionality is even heightened once you kind of run it through our human biases and everything.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be interesting, so before this season even started, I remember reading something about Edge of Extinction, like an interview with Jeff, and I think he compared it to like CSI or something like that. I forget exactly what he compared it to.
Oh yeah, like a murder mystery, right?
Yeah, it was
that recently. Yeah,
it was something like that where he said that it was before the season had aired, and he said something about like, why can't we mess around with the editing and do all of that stuff? Like, why does it have to be? And I started thinking to myself, and the more I think about that now, the more that I say, like, are they trying to hide who the killer is? And I'm using air quotes, but is the killer Victoria? And they're hiding who it is, or is the killer Lauren and they're hiding who it is? Because they're giving you hints at whose moves each move is, but they're not explicitly telling you the way they do in some of these super, super boring seasons. And another thing that they did tonight that makes it even harder to predict who's going to win is normally at the family visit, there's always one person who gets absolutely shafted. It was Troyzan and his brother. I forget who it was last season, but there was somebody who gets almost nothing. And tonight, every single one of the people got to speak while they were holding their loved ones, and they got a lot of content. So anybody who's saying there's no personal content, all 7 of them just got something, which is really crazy because normally someone's getting all right, give them a hug and get out of here. Like, everybody got their moment.
Yeah, and in a murder mystery, I mean, whenever you go to like a dinner theater thing or you're playing Clue, the board game, I mean, typically what'll happen is there will be a bunch of red herrings that will look extremely obvious for a short period of time, and then boom, they'll have some sort of alibi. So, I mean, that's essentially what's happened with the edit this season. You've had a bunch of people, I mean, for a little while, people convinced themselves that War Dog looked like the winner, even though, clearly his edit was kind of a little bit mixed. Yeah. Certainly people have been convinced that Rick is the winner. And I think he's probably going to go out maybe 4th or 5th is where he's probably headed. I think he'll probably last next episode and probably get booted in the early part of the finale, would be my guess. And, you know, people for a little while thought Kelly Wentworth would win. They thought David Wright would win. You know, Eric, even for a little while, people thought that he had a good edit. I mean, you know, so you've really seen a lot of folks go out. You know, Aubrey, people thought that, you know, maybe she was going to be able to pull it off this time. And so in that way, it really is like a murder mystery. And I mean, we're both sort of scrambling to figure out who the real killer is. I would love for her to be Victoria. That would certainly be very, very sneaky. And sometimes that is in murder mystery, it's the most subtle person who ends up being it. And so in that way, maybe Victoria is the move.
And who wouldn't rather watch a season like this? I mean, in my opinion, watching a season where I don't know the winner, those are the seasons that are always near the top of my list.
Victoria is such a good character that in an alternate version of the editing where she's just given this like heightened edit and she's like all over our TV screens, I'm probably, even though it would make the winner more obvious if she ends up being the winner, I would have really loved that season too.
Yeah, because they have not shown all of Victoria's personality. They're showing her as like stoic.
Yeah. Oh, no, right. Exactly. And she's often right. I mean, her reads on stuff. I mean, when you go back and look at some of the mistakes that other players have made, I mean, War Dog probably moved on Kelly too early. You know, that combo group probably moved on Eric too early, but Victoria was the kind of the voice of reason. She seems to have, you know, a lot of people call themselves super fans, but she kind of has the super fan instinct that all of us super fans really would sort of aspire to have, which is that she seems to know intuitively what times are good to make the move. You know, she doesn't wait too long, and what times are not good to make the move. Though on the Eric vote, she kind of went along with the group.
And how many people are looking at Victoria as somebody to vote out of the game?
Exactly. She manages, despite all the twists and turns, she basically has ended up on the majority every time, and she has received 0 votes against her.
0 votes against her. And so, and going back to your Lauren point, since the merge, Lauren has gotten no votes. And if she has, it was like throwaways, but I don't know the exact, but she has not been a target since the merge. And I think there's something to be said for that, because Victoria summed up this season in one sentence at Tribal Council last week or the week before. If you're making the big moves, you're putting a target on your back. But if you don't make big moves, the jury's not going to respect you. So I think that is the defining line of Survivor Edge of Extinction. Who is going to make enough big moves so that the jury recognizes them, but who's going to make so few that they actually get to the final 3? Because so far, everybody who has made a big move is sitting on the jury bench. Everybody else is in the game. And I think it's fascinating. It's Gabon, it's Ko-Rong. I mean, I'm sure there's other ones, and I forget. It's even got a little bit of Marquesas to it, even though Marquesas was still like a voting block. But it was like, how is Vesepia going to pull this out? That's kind of how I feel about some of these people.
And at the end game of Millennials versus Gen X, right? I mean, you saw, Zeke and David and Chris. I mean, Brett, all of them sort of go out. And, Sunday was sort of seen as a GOAT. Hannah was unfortunately seen as a GOAT. Ken was seen as a GOAT. And so you had kind of a battle between basically just the 2 players left who were playing there at Final Four. That was a little bit like this. I mean, I think that the other thing that's related that, that we learned a little bit from Jeremy Collins is the meat shield. What both Lauren and Victoria, is kind of the 2 people we're saying are most likely to win. What they did well, and we'll see if they actually do win, is they surrounded themselves with much more threatening people. The reason Lauren was not targeted in the post-merge is because she was aligned with War Dog, an extremely loud character, and Kelly Wentworth, who was a returning player who was had a huge threat level. And so now they've both been voted out. She would have never gone for any of them in any universe. And now they've both been voted out. So she's just been forgotten. Like so many times we've seen before, once you're the last person in kind of your tight group that's left, people forget about you for a little while because you're out of allies. And it's the same thing with Victoria. She was aligned with, Eric was seen as a big threat. Obviously, she was sort of loosely, even though they didn't go to tribal, loosely affiliated with Joe. Obviously, he needed to go. And she was at various points aligned with Ron. Julia was seen as a big threat for what seemed like an episode. She got that one little spike because she was kind of let power go to her head. And in each instance, Victoria was not even close to sort of the top totem pole of the alliance that she was in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But who would the winner be if Lauren wins? I have somebody who immediately jumps to mind, but what winner would she be like?
Oh, what winner would she be like? Well, I mean, I think I'll go back to the Natalie Anderson thing. I mean, I don't think she'll be as badass as Natalie Anderson. I think few people would be, but I think that she would be like Natalie Anderson in the sense that she'd have a revenge narrative at the end. And in order to win, I think she's going to have to continue pulling off moves over and over. I mean, she has a little bit of shades of Michelle Fitzgerald. I mean, who are some other sort of young?
To me, it's Danny Boatwright. because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly how Danny
That's true.
Boatwright
That's
played.
true. Last person in the alliance. Yeah, it's true.
That was it. That was all she had to do because that alliance fell apart. Gary Hogaboom or Danny, who we voting out tonight? We're voting out Gary. Okay, great.
Right.
Let's all eat each other. And that's what's happening with Lauren here. And I know that it wasn't as cut and dry. It wasn't 9 versus 3 or anything like that. David was still kind of in the middle. People were going back and forth. But if you really think about it, they were always worried about that trio of War Dog, Kelly, and Lauren.
And if you include David and Devins, they actually got back to parity at the final 5. They got it back to 5-5 miraculously, and then it's been essentially a pagonging since then. I mean, tonight was the first comma to go home in several votes.
And they were trying to still get rid of Rick Devins, but nobody has said Lauren, so they were so worried about this 3, and nobody's worried about Lauren. So yeah, I'm with you, and we're gonna go like another 10 minutes, and then I can go. I got to go to the Fair Play thing. So anybody who's in LA, go to the Fair Play thing at Busby's.
I saw Fair Play. You can tell him to say Finn. My son says hi because we brought my 8-month son to Baltimore to see Fair Play just a couple weeks ago. Actually, the crazy live tribal. I was with Fair Play, Wendell, and Bryce.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
quite
a lineup. Yeah,
look at that. I was at a watch party myself. I don't know if
they were with me. I guess
yeah. I don't know if I'm allowed to say on air, but I was at that watch party where that photo was taken of me behind the couch. That was the crazy.
There we go.
So you had a great time, but mine was a little bit better. But yeah, no, I'm excited to go to this thing, and I'm excited to see what it's like. But I love talking to Vaughn about this type of stuff because it's a different perspective, and I love talking to Alexa about it too. And I think Alexa's perspective would have changed big time after tonight when Ron goes home and Rick plays that idol. But I just like to hear like somebody's brand new take because we just had Jeff Pete on Sunday, and I don't know if you listened to it or not. But
I have not yet. No,
and it's totally fine. I don't blame you. But Jess Pete loves this season, and to hear somebody talk about this season from a lens that they love it is so much different than a lot of the previous survivors we have on. Like we had Brian Corden, and he was like, "Yeah, this season's not that good." And it's like when everybody's saying that, and then all of a sudden you get Jess who's like, "I love it," and here's the final 3, and here's who's going to win, and here's what like. It's such a different perspective. And, I love to hear, like, you don't sit here and talk like Alexa and I do so much that our brain melds into one.
Sure.
So you still have your own actual.
Somehow I've retained my own brain. Well, if you got 10 minutes left, since I can't be on the predictions episode, give me a little bit of taste of what you're going to say this weekend to Alexa. Who's going to win? Where we go from here? We got 6 people left. I mean, I think that the fair summation of this voting block tonight was that we saw Aurora, who has been constantly on the outs for the last several votes, but is good at challenges and can maybe win 1 or 2 more. She seems to be at least loosely, at least for now, aligned with Lauren and Victoria and Gavin, who sort of proved his loyalty to that group. So that's sort of a solid foursome with 6 people left. And it's pretty clear that Rick is on the outs, and it's pretty clear Julie is on the outs. And so it would seem to me, based on tonight, though obviously things can shift, Rick is going to be their number 1 option, but he is very likely, I think, to either win immunity or find an idol or somehow shake up the vote. I don't see him going home next week. And so then do they turn to Julie? Or does this season kind of continue with the theme, and does that force somehow eat itself?
I think Aurora goes home next week, and here's why. Because they had a really small thing tonight where somebody said, look, Aurora set herself up well with the jury. And it was like a really short thing. And I was like, wait, really? I thought everybody didn't like Aurora. But it was this really quick line. So I think that Aurora, because she was invisible really early on, she had like 4 episodes in a row where she didn't have a single confession. We didn't even know she was there. So I think Aurora goes this week right before the finale. And then the finale, you get one of the big players comes back in. I think Devins goes at 6. I think whoever comes back from Edge of Extinction goes at 5. And then my prediction is Gavin goes at 4, and our final 3 is Julie, Lauren, Victoria, and Lauren duke it out. With Julie still getting a couple of votes. I don't think she'll win because
how big is the jury, right? I mean,
so the jury's going to be 13 people. I think that Julie probably gets 2, maybe 3 votes because if you're looking at Julie, she's had too many tribals where she puts her heads in her hands and it's just like, oh my God, what's going on? That doesn't look good to the jury. But she does have Ron. And she does have maybe Reem, who might be like, look, you came out here and you killed it, girl. Like something like that, even though Reem had never met her. So I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, I see this being a final vote where all 3 people actually get a vote. But I think that Victoria edges out Lauren in the end. But ask me again after next week when, Victoria goes home and I'm sitting here going, what the hell was that?
Right. I mean, I think that one thing you said, I think I would definitely co-sign, which is that I think the person who comes back from Edge of Extinction is going to go quickly. I think either the same vote or the next vote, because that goes back to the editing. We didn't see anyone from Edge of Extinction. No one has a super great edit. I mean, everyone's kind of had like their own little flair here and there. I mean, Aubrey had a nice little scene. Kelly had an emotional scene. Chris had some early content. Eric had a couple really good scenes. So it's not clear to me, but I think that if the person who came back from Edge of Extinction was actually going to be in the final 3, which is something we talked about preseason, would be an extremely advantageous position to be in after having all this time to bond. And this is what completely screwed up my fantasy team, is because I was trying to pick all the people who would last on Edge of Extinction and could win a challenge, and then would be like nice enough where maybe they'd win in the end, and yada yada. That's my big excuse for the season. But yeah, I mean, I think that if the person was going to make the final 3, I think we would have had an Edge of Extinction, series or segment tonight.
Right. The only 2 who I think can get away with it without having the Edge of Extinction thing tonight are Wentworth and Wardog. Because Wentworth and Wardog, we got so much of before they got voted out. And we got that epic scene of Wentworth last night, which felt like the end of her story. But if she were to come back, I could see her getting the final 3.
It felt like a farewell for me for Wentworth, though. I think I'm out on her. I mean, I think that I could see it. I mean, the one thing that I keep thinking about is at the very beginning, and goes back to an editing thing. So I'm sorry for those of you who hate the edit talk, but they taught us about a few pairs that were important to the game. And they said Lauren and Wentworth was an important pair. That proved to be a very important pair. I mean, those 2 were together for most of the game and were an extremely dynamic duo. They told us that that David and Devins was a pair. That also proved to be very important. Devins was able to get an advantage. I mean, we even saw David today sort of like basically cheering Devins on from the jury. But we also were told that Gavin and Eric were a really important pair. And we didn't see much of that. We really did not. I mean, obviously they were, Gavin ended up betraying Eric, but it wasn't a huge storyline. And so that makes me think that maybe Eric, especially given some of the positive contact he's on Edge of Extinction, and the fact that he's just like a fit guy who would, just in a general challenge, you'd have to give him pretty good odds, him or Chris, at pulling it out based on what the challenge is. I think maybe he comes back and tries to pair up with Eric in the finale, and maybe it goes awry for both of them.
I could see that happening as well. Also, if Aurora does get voted out next week, like I'm predicting, she could easily be the person who comes back in a challenge. You know what I mean?
So anyone. I mean, that goes for anyone. I mean, they didn't show anyone on Edge tonight. They hyped up, as you said, all the personal content for everyone. So I mean, whoever is voted out next episode, if they come immediately back in, and maybe they have some advantages in terms of mental state. Because I think Andrea probably wears on you, right? Exactly. If they can't, and Aurora certainly would be a good candidate for her. I mean, she's still in pretty good shape. Unlike Victoria and Julie, who were struggling in the Loved Ones Challenge today. I mean, I think Aurora's got a lot left in the tank.
Well, I liked Rick talking to his wife and just being like, "All right, so what are we doing here?" Because there's no way he was going to win. The other one that I really wanted to say was that this was the damn it Reed.
Oh, I know. Exactly. It was.
So anybody who is a huge fan of and has been watching since Heroes versus Villains, this was when Colby became like ultra villain Colby. We're just like, damn it, Reed. Like he's just screaming at his brother, and Colby sucked. Like Colby was doing nothing good that entire episode.
Yeah, exactly. And but I mean, the mistake that Colby and Ron made is you don't try to win the challenge. Ultimately, Reed did him a huge favor.
Absolutely.
Don't. I mean, he didn't really capitalize on it. But you don't win the damn Love One reward challenge ever. I mean, hopefully this is such a visible boot that you can tie, that the edit really tied directly to Ron's decision to win. I mean, and even if you're going to win, you don't take your number one ally in that situation. I wanted to say that. I mean, you don't pick Julie. He said, I need to make sure she's in my back pocket. She was in his back pocket. Yeah, I mean, he blindsided her a couple of votes, and she came back and had absolutely harbored no ill will against him at all. In fact, she had that line about how, sometimes it'll be good for us not to vote together, and then that way people won't realize how close we are. If that's not the sign of someone who's fully in someone's pocket, I don't know what is. And so that was completely unnecessary to do. Now, Gavin, I guess maybe a little bit more of a swing. That one makes sense, especially because I think other people probably felt for him given the whole honeymoon situation. But you don't pick Julie there. I think that's a mistake. If you are going to win, you got to be a little bit more strategic. Pick the people on the bottom of the alliance. Make them feel good. Don't pick the person who's your right-hand woman who's at the top of the alliance.
And once again, it comes down to Ron, Rick, Wardog. They were all underestimating the women. And I'll just keep on saying it because this is Ron. He didn't underestimate Julie, but he underestimated Aurora. He underestimated Victoria, and he underestimated Lauren. The smart move tonight is take Victoria because she's in your alliance more than Aurora, more than Lauren. Take her and take Gavin because everybody's going to be okay with you taking Gavin. because Gavin had the whole honeymoon thing. And he even said he did a very smart thing here where it was like, I didn't tell any of you this, but we got married 2 days before we came out here. And I think that that's a great moment because that means Gavin's not trying to use this. And this is very much like Adam Klein with his mom. He didn't try to use this throughout the game. And that says a lot about that person. And it also says a lot about like what everybody else knows about them. So in that moment, you're going to take them. It's Johnny Fairplay, which I'm about to go see, saying his grandmother just died. You're going to let things happen. Right. And so I was totally fine with the Gavin one, but I agree with you. Taking Julie, unless you are Rick Devens and you're sitting there and it's David and 5 people who want to vote you out and Rick Devens wins and he says, I'm taking David because he's the only one who likes me. Right. Unless you're in that type of situation, you don't take your closest.
And he wasn't. I mean, he essentially had a situation where everybody but Rick was kind of loosely aligned with him, at least in some, at least was willing to work with him. And I think that, he basically made the mistake of winning, made the mistake of picking the wrong people. And then more broadly, on a season where everyone's going after the head honcho, I mean, he was just reveling in the fact that he was running the game, obviously, to his husband. I mean, they were really hyping up the fact that he thought he was the mastermind. And the moment you think you're the mastermind, you're gone.
You're gone. You're gone. Well, Vaughn, I could sit here and I could talk to you for another 45 minutes, but you can blame Johnny Fairplay for deciding this week. And all of a sudden, Alexa wasn't supposed to be able to do the 8th, and then it turned into she can't do the 1st. She can do the 8th, and I'm like, what's going on here?
I don't at all mind being shown up by Johnny Fairplay. I think that being stood up for the legend himself will not hurt my feelings in the slightest.
That's it. I gotta go see him, and I gotta tell him all the nice things I've always wanted to say to his face. But what's some parting thoughts here before I pretend that I'm Alexa and try to give some sort of closing statement?
Thanks for having me on. I think the season has gone from somewhat bad to above average. I'm excited for the end of it. I wish my fantasy team could have stepped up a little bit. I remain embarrassed about that, but I'm happy to go for the gold again next year. I'm happy to have the eliminator crown at the very least. It wasn't a total strikeout for yours truly. But overall, I'll just say something I very rarely say, which is that I hope you're right about Victoria. I think she's been a pleasure to watch, and I think she'd be an awesome fitting win to what has been a pretty entertaining season.
Yeah, and I hope you're right, man. That's I'm hoping the same thing. Yeah. But thank you, Vaughn, so much for coming on, for filling in. And I guess I'll try real quick. But anyway, so Alexa will be back. We're actually going to be podcasting on Friday, so you only have to take a day break between us and doing our predictions and power rankings because Alexa, I think, is doing something again this weekend. I don't know. Will and I are going to figure out the Amazing Race podcast. So that's the least important podcast, I believe. I think I might have just cut out, but we're going to be podcasting at 2:30 Pacific time. I believe it's 2:30 Pacific time with Alec Merlino and Carrot. So we're getting both of them at the same time here. So this is going to be a fun one. This might be the last This might be our last guest of the season because normally for the finale predictions, Alexa and I just sit here and try to predict who everybody's going to vote for, which I am not doing jury roulette this season because I'm not going through who 13 people are going to vote for. That is ridiculous. Somebody else who gets paid more money than me can do that. But we'll be back on Friday with that. Will and I will be back at some point with the Amazing Race episode 3 recap. And subscribe here. Go over to Patreon. Follow us there. We did a great thing for season 40, which might be winners. And if it is, Alexa and I broke it down who we think it's going to be. So go follow us over on Patreon.
It'll be Reem.
Reem, absolutely.
Reem's going to go for her second victory on season 40 if it's
exactly. And they're going to have Edge of Extinction again, and Reem is going to be voted out on day 3 again, and she's going to win.
Yes, legend.
Love
queen
it.
Stays the queen.
Queen stays queen. But other than that, I don't know what else Alexa says. Follow us on things. Do that. And otherwise, Vaughn, thank you so much again for coming on, and I will see everybody on Friday.